Good evening. I'm getting a little bit worried. John Nix just came and handed Chris a bunch of caution signs. I don't know if that's for tonight or what, but now I'm going to kind of hang around on this side. I don't know if he's telling me to go ahead and wrap up or what, but thank you all for coming out this evening. We are going to be in Matthew 25, and we're going to start out in verse 36. We're going to do a lot of jumping around. Andrew, would you mind going ahead and starting us out in a word of prayer?
Gather here together, dear Lord. Lord, during this time of holidays, dear Lord, please help everybody that is traveling. Please help them be safe to and from their families, dear Lord. Lord, just please be with us as we leave here. Please be with us as we go to celebrate tomorrow, dear Lord. Please help us just love each other and let your light shine through us. In your son's name we pray.
Thank you. So we're going to be in Matthew 25, starting out in verse 36. And if you were here last week, it's pretty much just a straight continuation of what Henry talked about last week, talking about with the predictions of the end of Jerusalem and then the predictions of the end of times. And so now we're going to move into kind of this penultimate lesson of everything that we've been building up over this past year. So this whole past year, starting out in January, was looking at the teachings of Jesus. And we started out with the Sermon on the Mount. We went through all of Matthew 5. We kind of jumped a few more chapters from there, and then we just kind of kept on moving along with that. But what we're looking at is now having everything come to a culmination. What is it that all of these teachings are leading to? And that's what Henry's lesson last Wednesday, my lesson tonight, and then next week, New Year's Eve, Chris Warren is going to wrap it up for us with kind of that ultimate final lesson of Jesus' teachings. So it's really cool to me how all of this is structured. The Bible is one of the greatest historical documents that we have, but it's also a really well-written story in terms of plot, in terms of character arcs, and just everything. It's just a wonderfully written story with everything the way that it's placed and done, and everything pretty much points to that final teaching that we have here in the end of Matthew. And last week, Henry went into talking about the destruction of Jerusalem and looking at the different prophecies there, destruction of Jerusalem, end of the world. And now he's going to give us two different allusions, he's going to give us one allegory and one allusion. Sorry, not allegory, wrong name. He's going to give us one comparison, and he's going to give us one allusion, which is just it's a fancy way of saying that he references a past historical event. So we're going to get into those two things in a second. Looking in Matthew 24, that's my bad. Matthew 24. I'm looking at the little numbers in the top right, and I just see Matthew 25, and I forget the fact that it's not technically Matthew 25 yet. So Matthew 24, and we're going to be in 36. Thank you, Haley. Matthew 24, 36. But of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, but my Father only. So there's two things here that I want us to notate real quick, just since we're looking at this study in terms of the broad context of Scriptures. We're not looking at just this one little verse right here. We need to look at everything together. First off, he says, but, which means we got to go back and make sure that we know what he is talking about. Then he also says, that day. So there's a point whenever I'm teaching my wonderful 8th graders where I'm like, okay, he said two things. He said, but he said that day. What is that day that he's talking about? And then for some reason it takes their brains 20 minutes to figure out that, oh, I'm looking for them to answer something for me. And I need them to go back and read the text to understand what it's talking about here. So let's go back and figure out, first off, he said but, which means we need to look at something beforehand. And then second off, that day. What is that day that he's referencing here in 36? The day he comes back. Come back up here real quick. Still in verse 24. We didn't jump to 25 yet. 29. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven and the powers of the heaven will be shaken. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heaven to the other. He then moves into a parable of a fig tree, which Henry also covered last week. But let's go back now to 36. That day, no one knows, not even the angels. So he tells us something very specific about the day that he will return. And what is that? No one will know. Henry also talked about this a little bit last week, so let's kind of review a little bit. There have been so many times, just in my lifetime, where someone has said, this is the exact specific hour, date, and time that Christ will return. Because there's a very specific way that this star from the belt of Orion coincides with Stonehenge. And because Stonehenge is rotated at specifically a 45-degree angle and is counteracted with the way that the pyramids are connected, that day he's going to come back this day. You have to be in the mental gymnastics in order to figure out what they mean. But even beyond every single bit of those leaping to mental gymnastics and everything, we don't know. For me, I really like schedules. I like having a specific time whenever we leave whenever we leave to go somewhere. I'll say, Haley, when are we leaving? What's our schedule looking at? And then I'll ask, all right, what's the plan for tomorrow? Because I need to know. Are we leaving at 8 o'clock in the morning? Are we leaving at 2 o'clock in the afternoon? It takes me a while to get ready. I need to know. We are very much so schedule-oriented beings. And so a lot of people don't like this idea of not knowing the specific hour and the day and the time. But Christ tells us outright, we do not know. Flip over to Acts 1. Acts 1, verses 6 and 7. Therefore, when they had come together, they asked him, saying, Lord, will you at this time restore the kingdom to Israel? And he said to them, it is not for you to know the times or seasons which the Father has put into his own authority. Turn to Deuteronomy 29. When someone gets to Deuteronomy 29, go ahead and read verse 29, please.
But the things revealed be unto us and to our children forever, that we may follow all the words of his law.
There's been plenty of times that he's told us, we're not going to know some things. We're not going to know the time. We're not going to know the hour. Go to Ecclesiastes 3. And this is honestly one of my favorite sections, not because half of these different sayings remind me of John Grisham books, but because a lot of it is extremely important here for us to be able to ground ourselves in our knowledge of God and the world and his desires for us. To everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to gain and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace. God controls the timing. It is all entirely up to God. We don't need to know. That's not our purpose. But why do we keep on trying to become so enthralled with knowing or predicting the end of times, despite Jesus and God telling us multiple times, we're not going to know? Why are we so enthralled with wanting to know? Please.
First Corinthians chapter 4 and verse number 6. This is one of these verses that tells us not to do something, and it also tells us the heart problem behind doing it. But in 1 Corinthians chapter 4 and verse number 6, now Paul is talking about, this being stewards of this mystery that he's going to talk about the Ephesians. This mystery that God had concealed, but now is revealed to us through his holy apostles and prophets, that everybody can be saved, So in verse number 6, he says, now these things, I'll talk about, I figuratively transferred to myself and Apollos for your sakes, that you may learn in us not to think beyond what is written. So don't try to outthink God. Don't think beyond what is written, that none of you may be puffed up on behalf of one against the other. For who makes you differ from another? And what do you have that you did not receive? What did you get that you weren't taught? It's not like we taught you these things. Now, if indeed you did receive it, why do you boast as if you didn't receive it? As if like you've got some kind of special revelation. You've got some kind of special thing that you have. So, I think that 1 Corinthians 4, 6, and 7 tells us the reason why. It's because he says, so you won't be puffed up. You won't be swollen up. You won't have a big head. I think people like to be in the know. Same reason people tell gossip. They like to control people with their words. They like to have power over somebody.
Yeah, people just like to know. And God has given us everything that we need to understand his word. He's given us all the knowledge, and now it's our job to study it, but not to, like you said, get a puffed up head over it.
2028. Like people would be like, oh, I'm going to get my life right in 2028. They might use that as their, that's my goal. I just got to get right by 2028 and I'll be good.
Yeah. And we're going to get into that in a second whenever we get to these different comparisons that he's making and this allusion that he makes to Noah eventually. Mr. Tom, did I see your hand?
We always think kind of everything's got to be chronological, but it's quite possible this decision is not a set time-based thing. It's condition-based. If you think about it, why wouldn't Jesus know? Why would the Father keep a secret from the Son? It doesn't make much sense unless what? It's going to be a decision. that's one of these things here that to me, just reasoning what's said there, and it may be a time chronological decision on the following knows, but it makes more sense to me that it's a condition-based thing. When everything's right, that's when he's going to make that call, and it's going to be the end, and he's the only one that's going to make the call. So there's not a time for me, if it's condition-based, I can't tell you when it is. I can just, Jesus says he doesn't know. He may know the condition, but he doesn't know the time. They asked about the time. When's it going to happen? It's not, can't answer the question that way.
So let me make sure I understand your comment correctly. So you're saying that God knows when that day is going to be, but that day is going to be conditional?
God will make the call.
Okay.
It's not a known day in terms of it's going to happen, 1,000 years or so many days from now or so many days and hours. It's condition-based. It's kind of like there's times in the Old Testament when you would go, for example, why did the children of Israel have to wait 400 years in Egypt? Which, it actually ended up being 432 years, okay? But God told Abraham they're going to be down in Egypt for 400 years, and he tells him this, that the covenant of iniquity of the Amorites is not for you. In other words, they are not evil enough for me to destroy them. Because his plan was everybody gets destroyed, when they go in there. They didn't carry the plan out in the end like he intentioned. But some things are condition-based. When the time's right, it's going to happen. The Father's going to make that call when the time's right.
It's kind of like he did with Noah, right? And why he was building the ark.
It's hard for us we think everything's got to be time-based, but that's not necessarily, that's the way we think.
That is true. I mean, that is kind of like a big point that I'm making here about the fact that we as humans, we have to have a set time and place. That's why we have calendars on our phones now.
It's a number thing. When this number of people that are saved is all comes up where God wants it, then he's going.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. I don't know what the criteria would be, but to me would make sense if it is condition based, not just a chronological. It's going to be this long, and then it's
Yeah, and I do see what you're saying with that. I had never thought about it in that particular manner before. Instead of having God knowing a specific date or time, instead it's a conditional thing that whenever God decides that it's time, then it happens. And you do bring up an interesting point. I don't know enough particularly about that ideology to agree or disagree with you, and it's given me something to study about. Right. Yeah.
To me, that just seems a little odd. Why would it be that kind of secret? To me, what makes sense is it's a decision God's going to make when the conditions are right. When things have reached the point that he's going to make the call, and he's going to be the one that makes the call. And so,
Galatians 4:4 says that his first coming was condition-based. You think about this.
yeah.
Jesus could have came right after the garden. Right? His sacrifice was good enough to take care of Adam and Eve's, and it was good enough to take care of from Jesus all the way from Pentecost or Passover, when he was crucified, all the way back to Adam and Eve, and then all the way forward. Hebrews 10:12 says, once and for all, his sacrifice was good enough for all times. So Galatians 4 in verse 4 says, when the fullness of time, when the time was full, Christ came, born of a woman, born under the law. And we could sit here and try to, hypothesize or pontificate why, was it because, Rome had established this great network that could carry the gospel, that everybody in the world could speak Greek, all these things we could say, but Christ's first coming was condition-based. Now, the God of heaven does not even tell us what conditions had to be met. It just said that when the fullness of time came, he was born of a woman, born under the law. And so the only thing that we knew about Christ was all the prophecies, that we would know who the Christ was. We could know things like during the times of the Roman kings, we could know places, we could know certain little tidbits, but God had this fullness, whatever that meant, that everything was, all the ducks were in a row is the way I'd say it. All the ducks were in a row. Now it's time to dispatch Jesus into the world. John 1:13, he's in heaven. John 1:14, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Whatever happened between 1:13 and 1:14 was, like Tom's describing, as the fullness of time. That this earth that we live on, God's like, send
And
it.
if you think about it also, God is a timeless being.
Right.
So, like, and even in Genesis, why did he set the sun and the moon in place doing what they do? Why did he have it set up that way? For our benefits, for seasons and times and things. It's not like he needed that to keep time. No. So anyway, that's just some thoughts on this. We get worked up. But the important point you're moving to is
We don't know.
you don't know.
Yeah.
And you got to be ready for that.
So I do like y'all's. I am liking them. If I'm following you correctly, it looks like we have enough contextual evidence in order to conclude that it is a conditional idea, especially if you're correlating it to the ideas of Noah's being conditional in terms of the first coming of Christ being conditional. We have plenty of contextual evidence there. Mr. Bryan, I saw your hand a little while ago, and I want to go ahead and give you a chance. And Jerry, I'm sorry I cut you off, but let me get Brian. He had his hand up earlier too.
I was just going to say earlier, we talked about people predicting when it's going to be, when it's coming, and all that. So far, they've all been wrong.
Yeah, I've lived through.
I'm going to put stock in that.
Yeah, I've lived through about 7 world-ending events in my lifetime. Some of them I didn't even know it happened, like Y2K. I survived Y2K. Yeah. Like you said, all of them were wrong. I watched the movie 2012, and when everything was supposed to happen, I just kind of laughed at it the entire time. So, yeah, exactly right. All of them have been wrong. Mr. Jerry, and then I saw your hand over there too, and I'll come right back to you.
Yeah, I was just kind of tagging on a little bit here that, the condition-based, these things are going to come to fruition, right? At some point when God feels that it's right or wrong, or, the world's done, and here's people that are going to come home with him, and then it's over, right? But we got to remember that 2 Peter 1:3 tells us what to do, right? It says, according to his divine power, hath given us all things that pertain to life and godliness, and through the knowledge of him that hath called us to glory and virtue. So, it's easy to say we shouldn't worry about the time, but we have what we need now, all the things we need for life and godliness, to get to that point, to be in.
So you're right. We don't need to worry about the time, but we better make sure that we're ready when that time comes. And that's what we're going to start transitioning into now. We've spent 30 minutes on one verse, so let's move a little bit. Yes, Mel.
I think it's a matter of people believing, they feel better when they know, because they have a list of expectations or, things, preparations that they're, kind of looking forward to. And so I think overall it's just comforting when they feel safe with just knowing, or at least thinking they know. And I think that's why sometimes, we predict things and we feel better about, believing that we know, instead of just going to the Word.
Yeah. Yeah, and so something we're going to move into in just a second as well is what happens when we start to feel complacency. And I think one of the big reasons of us not knowing is because it, for lack of better terms, it keeps us on our toes. So, like what Haley said, if we were told, hey, he's coming back December 19th at 2:30 p.m. 2028, then I guarantee you these pews would be full that Sunday. But he doesn't, because it's up to us to make sure that we are ready regardless of the day, the time, or anything else. Yes?
So I'm sure as an English teacher, you give essays, let's say you give them 3 weeks in advance before the essay is due. How many of the students are going to have the essay done?
They better have not done it in 1 week. Do what?
Like none of the students are going to do the essay like the next day. You give it to them, you say, all right, 3 weeks from now, this essay is going to be due. How many of them will start on it that night? One out of your class.
Yep.
I know, like me, they're going to wait until literally the night before, write the essay, and usually it's not going to be very good. But like it creates they have a false sense of security. It's like, oh, it's 3 weeks away. I have plenty of time to do it. And then the next week, they're like, oh, it's 2 weeks away. I still have plenty of time. Oh, it's still a week away. Like I could write a 5-page essay in a week. That's easy. And then a couple days before, they're like, maybe I should.
Listen, I'm just glad that you're writing it the night before. I'll show you my missing work document. It'll make your toes curl. But no, you do bring up a good point there. We would procrastinate right up there until the very end. I wrote most of my essays around 2 o'clock in the morning whenever I was in college. I did all my best work at 2 a.m. Not because I wanted to, but because I put it off way too far.
Back off that, it's just, we as Christians, I feel like we think that we have until we go to the grave. And we think the grave is very far, far away. And so we've got all until like we get to 80 to figure ourselves out. But really it could be tomorrow when I get in a car accident, that's it.
It's that due date that we think life is going to give us, but we don't have that. We don't know the time, we don't know the date, we don't know the hour. But over the past 50 weeks, because we still have next week too, over the past 50 weeks, we've been studying the playbook. This year I've started teaching across the hallway with the defensive coordinator for the high school football team. And he'll talk to me about watching film, because he's got to be ready for that game on Friday. Well, over the past 50 weeks, we've been watching film. We've been studying. We've been looking at the teachings of Jesus, all leading up to the last week, tonight, and next week, of why every single bit of this matters. So that the day that we don't know when it's coming, but we know it's coming, we will be ready. So he makes an allusion to Noah, and let's go ahead and jump into that one real quick. And then later on, he's going to make a parable.
Parables we have that tells us that very thing. You got the parable of virgins and the oil, right? You got the thief coming in the night. So it's right there in front of us that this is something that you need to be prepared for always, not before the devil.
Mm-hmm. Thank you all so much for your comments. But Andrew joked with me earlier about, if I don't have enough time, it's okay if we get out 30 minutes early. Well, I'm hoping that I let y'all out 30 minutes after we're supposed to finish so that Santa can get some sleep tonight before putting out presents. Let's go ahead and move on to the allusion that he makes to Noah. But as the days of Noah were, so also will the coming of Son of Man be. For as in the days before the flood, they were eating, drinking, marrying, and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark, and did not know until the flood came and took them all away. So also will the coming of Son of Man be. So he's making this allusion now to compare it to the flood of Noah. So at this point, he's kind of giving them an understanding into their own culture, because they all grew up on the story of Noah, just like we all grew up on the account of Noah. We all grew up on the account of Noah, and they grew up all learning about that as their historical documents, their historical past. So they knew how to immediately reference this idea to themselves. Noah was the only one prepared. He knew what was coming, and it's my belief that Noah was doing his absolute best too, until the days that the waters came up and the rains fell, that he was preaching the word of the Lord. And also, I don't know how people could ignore a giant boat in someone's backyard and not ask questions. It was a normal day, though. The floods came, and the unrighteous were swept away. He compares that to the future, the return of the Son of Man. It'll be a normal day. Eating, drinking, marrying, giving in marriage. It'll be a normal day. Haley? Oh, sorry. Then he moves on to kind of further explain this idea. Verse 40. Then 2 men will be in the field. One will be taken, the other will be left. 2 women will be grinding at the mill. One will be taken, the other left. Watch therefore, for you do not know what hour your Lord is coming. I think there's something really specific about the mention of 2 in the field, 2 grinding. What are they doing? They're just doing their normal, as Chris just put it, stuff. They're just working, going about their day. And a lot of those different world-ending predictions that we've had have all been some grandiose day that they've taken the square root of this day to the whatever of this, and it all comes back to aliens or Stonehenge or whatever. When's he going to come back? Normal day. Some will be ready, some will not. Verse 43. But know this, that if the master of the house had known what hour the thief would come, he would have watched and not allowed his house to be broken into. Therefore, you also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. He's giving us 3 different ways that we can understand this idea that we do not know the time. First off, he said, hey, you're not going to know the time. Then he gave us 3 different ways that we can potentially understand it. We're going to talk about a 4th in just a second. First off, he compared it to Noah. He said, look at the people in Noah's day. They didn't know. Normal day. They were washed away. 2 in the field. 2 at the grain. Normal day. End of times. He gives us that 3rd one. The thief. If the master of the house knew, if that thief sent a welcoming card, said, hey, I'm coming on this day, I guarantee you he would be prepared. 100%. So 3 different ways that he then concludes that idea of not knowing. Then he moves into a parable in verse 45. So if you didn't get the first 3 reasons, the first 3 ways to understand what he's trying to teach us, he goes and gives us a 4th one, just in case we need a little bit more of grinding in the idea. Verse 45. Who then is a faithful and wise servant whom his master made ruler over his household, to give them food in due season? Blessed is that servant whom his master, when he comes, he will find doing. Assuredly I say to you that he will make him a ruler over all his goods. But if that evil servant says in his heart, my master is delaying his coming, and begins to beat his fellow servants, and to eat and drink with drunkards, the master of that servant will come on a day when he is not looking for him, and at an hour that he is not aware of, and he will cut him in 2 and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. There shall be a weeping and gnashing of teeth. So he concludes this idea with a parable. On one hand, you've got a servant who is 100% prepared for the coming of the master. Then, oppositely to that, you have the evil servant, the wicked servant, whichever one your translation says. And what happens to that wicked servant when he is wrought with complacency?
I got all this time.
Yeah, about like that.
Always,
Yeah. I'm going to go back on, once we come back for Christmas, I'm going to go back and hey, listen, you don't do your work, weeping and gnashing of teeth. Right here, it says it. But if we didn't get it the first 3 times, here we go. We don't know the hour, we don't know the day. He is going to come back. We're not going to know when it is. But we do know that we better be ready. And that's what we've spent the last 50 weeks of this year looking at the teachings of Jesus, studying that playbook, making sure that whenever he comes back, we're the servant where he says, well done, my good and faithful servant. not the one that gets cut in two and thrown to the weeping of gnashing of teeth. I think he lays it out pretty pointedly for us. Makes it pretty easy for us to understand. It's not going to be something that we can get ready for the night before. I don't get an itinerary. I would love an itinerary, but we're not going to get one. What warning does this give to us? How does this 2,000-year-old message, how does this warn us?
I want to make a comment about what something Brian said a while ago. And, Brian said all of them were wrong or something to that effect. The interesting thing that anybody that's ever said, let me say this first. We need to land this in our mind that this is a real event that's going to happen. And I mean, we really need to settle this account in our mind that he is going to come back one day. And we need to be real sure that that's going to happen. Now, let me say this. Everybody that's ever said it might happen today was right. Land that in your mind. That that it could have happened in any day.
Yeah. And you had one specific word in there that changed that from what everyone else said. You said might.
Right.
So if you didn't hear Chris, he said that every single person that said that he might come back today was right. Because we need to be looking forward to the fact that it might be today. It might be tomorrow.
I mean, I've just heard preachers, classically, what we would call extend the invitation, say these things like that, and every one of them was right. We think about Noah as like this guy that built a boat for 100 years. Well, the Bible doesn't say it took him 100 years. It just says it's 100 years from the time God told him. It's fixing to come up, we're going to rain, and the end of all flesh is come before me. And then it's 100 years later that God shuts the door on the ark, right? That ark could have been built for 50 years, sitting behind his house, like you're talking about. That thing had been sitting there for 50 years, and Noah still had to land in his mind. Hebrews 11:7 says, though divinely warned of things yet not seen. Nobody ever seen it rain before. Noah had it landed in his mind. Whatever God means by the fact that it's going to rain, all I know is I got to get that boat ready. And we got to land that same thing in our mind, that it is going to happen one day. That the Lord may stitch up this world, that Santa Claus might not come. I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. You said we're going to go home, and so everybody can get dressed for Santa Claus. That's because we've conditioned ourselves to think that tomorrow is going to be here. Yeah. And all I'm trying to get us to think is that it's a real event that's really going to happen.
I 100% believe in the historical account of the Bible. 100%. If I can have that amount of faith of something that was written down for us, I need to have the same amount of faith of what might be in the future. Well, we know what will be in the future, but the might is when it might happen. That's what all of us need to have 100% faith for. Like Chris is saying, this event is going to happen. We don't know when, but it is. And I don't think that I can summarize or conclude any better than what Chris has already said. So I want to thank you for all joining us this evening. Let's conclude next week with the final lesson, the teaching of Jesus. Thank you all.